I remember coming home and telling my parents that I'm dating someone from outside the culture, and I was so upset that they just didn't accept it.
That poses a problem bringing it back in, because if what works for you is you fall in love with a guy from outside your culture, how is that going to fit?
Welcome back to Relationships Unplugged. We are your co-hosts, Sereena Varja.
And I'm Janet Reepstone.
And today we will be talking about dating in different cultures. So should we start with telling everyone a little bit about our cultural backgrounds, Janet?
Yep, you go first.
Okay. I'm Indian. I'm more specifically Gujarati. I'm also a second generation immigrant. So I think my cultural background, yes, I've grown up with a lot of my heritage, Indian heritage, but being born in England and growing up in England, I have definitely adopted a lot of the English culture. What about you, Janet?
Well, I was brought up in New York. I'm an American. I am of Jewish heritage, but very non-observant. However, it feels like it's part of my identity, even so. In my late 20s, I met and married an Englishman who was not Jewish, not American, had lived in America for a bit, so had some idea of my culture, but I hadn't, except through reading novels and seeing films, never lived here, so didn't know what I was getting into,
Yeah.
except in one sort of imaginary way.
I mean, how was that for you, actually? Like, when you dated an English person, what were the main differences that you found? Did you find it was difficult at times?
Yeah, I thought it was, first of all, it was refreshing. The main thing was it was very refreshing because it made me, it puts into real relief your own cultural practices when you see them just something taken as you took for granted, as somebody else takes something else completely for granted, and they're
Yeah.
different. So that's the first thing, and that can be both difficult and illuminating and interesting. But I have to say that I think in the beginning, when the person's coming into a dominant culture, so your parents being immigrants into the British culture, it's a very different experience from the other way around. So our beginnings were him coming into my culture, and there was a very much less of a sensitivity in a way that I would have,
Yeah.
because I, you take it as read, and people are supposed to come along with it. You only see when the things feel so really uncomfortable, or a protest is made, that that you kind of go, no, wait a minute, and then you either adapt, or mostly you adapt mostly toward the dominant culture. So 2 years later, well, actually, it's a long story, but 6 years later, or more even, we permanently moved. We did a bit back and forth, permanently moved to Britain, where it became much more my struggle to try to see how I could fit into the British culture,
Yeah.
because that was much more of that's much more the demand, that you do it that way. And then, of course, when you have children, they get a blend of things. And that's essentially what an intercultural relationship has to try to do, to try and give some breathing space to the other culture while making it viable to live in the dominant culture.
Yeah.
So you do some blending,
Yeah.
essentially.
I have personally been in an intercultural relationship, but it was very difficult at times, I found. I think especially for my family. When I come
Yes.
home and told my family, I was dating this person and they are not like us at all, I think it was a
Yeah.
shock for them. And
Yeah.
I don't think they knew how to necessarily deal with it. Um, Intercultural relationships are becoming more accepted, though, as time goes on. I think that is probably because of immigration, how many
Yeah.
people kind of come over to different countries, especially
Yeah.
England. Um,
Mhm.
in America, actually, 52% of Gen Z and millennial Americans view them as a good thing for society. So, and I do believe that cultural sharing is a good thing for society. I think it gives you a lot of different opinions, a lot of different ways of life that you necessarily wouldn't have thought of in the first place.
Mhm.
Um, and there's a lot of positives to cultural sharing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's what I said. My first reaction when you asked me what it was like was interesting. It
Yeah,
was, it stretches you. There's no question about that. Um, but I think for culture, for intercultural relationships to work, there has to be a, a, a sense of at the beginning, an appreciation and a curiosity
definitely.
about culture. So you have to have a certain openness to thinking, oh, that's intriguing, or oh, I like that about that. So I liked the English reserve in comparison to this wildly expressive New York kind of, over emotionalism.
Yeah.
I did that, even though it made me feel like, wait a minute, what's wrong with me? So, it was good for me to see that there was another way. So I was drawn to that. And I think you have to have some feeling of being drawn, or it,
Yeah.
it will never.
Yeah, I agree with that one completely. I think in the past, I have felt that partners were probably open to getting to know my culture or my religion,
Yes,
because I'm
that's it.
Hindu
Yeah,
as well.
yeah,
So Hinduism compared to, say, Islam or Christianity is very
yeah,
different.
yeah.
So the having curiosity to learn about it is one thing that you need, I think, when you start an intercultural relationship. Um, it was interesting actually. I saw this stat: 49% of Brits still fear backlash for dating someone from a different ethnic background.
The operative word is fear. They fear backlash. They may not feel themselves the prejudices, or admit to them anyway,
Yeah,
but they are probably right to feel that the 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 cultural surround dominant discourse about different cultures is to be afraid, is to reject them, push them
yeah,
aside, push them away. So I think I think if you asked a different question, I don't know if the researchers did, which is what has been your actual experience when you're in an intercultural relationship, I think would be quite different.
yeah. I think it's because I saw that and I thought about my family, and I think my family have come a very long way in, accepting people's cultures into our family. I think it
Yeah,
was very difficult for a lot of people at the start because it's a
yeah,
fear that your culture might be washed down a little bit.
that's, that's right.
Yeah. Um, and of course, when intercultural couples feel judged, they tend to invest less in their relationship. So people who felt rejected or marginalized were less likely to integrate their identities and more likely to keep them separate in this case.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that there's an awful lot of very hardy research over the years that what makes relationships, part of what makes relationships last is support from your family and your friends.
Yep.
So people who don't approve and actively, don't give you support, if that is your family's response and you have a cleavage instead of a joining, that
Yep.
that 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 threatens the relationship. That the survival of the relationship is less secure.
Yeah. I mean, you were just saying earlier on how you have like a dominant culture, right? In an
Yeah.
intercultural relationship. I mean, that
Yes.
can have its own issues in itself, couldn't it? Could leave one person feeling a bit neglected from
Yeah.
their identity or rejected from the other person's culture or rejected from their own culture a little bit, like they feel their partner doesn't accept their culture. Um, did you feel any of that when you first got into like a
Of course, I think there's a power dynamic. Every couple has a power dynamic that comes and goes. It can be, fixed so that it's always more powerful, but usually it's fluid,
yeah,
and over particular things. And that can become something that's really operates as, but this is the way you have to do it. And this is the way you should do it. And you're getting it wrong all the time.
yeah,
You're getting it wrong too much of the time. And that does create a kind of, imbalance. So there is more pressure on the person entering
Yeah.
the dominant culture to adapt. And as you say, that means sometimes it means sacrificing something that, that also makes for some instability in intercultural relationships, because how far do you go in giving
Yeah.
over?
Yeah, that's
Or
true.
the other way could be true. How far do you make allowances? So, for instance, I mean, I've always been interested when people, for me and my husband, religion was not a problem, because neither of us came from, religion wasn't very important to us. We didn't have a real commitment to a particular way to bring up our children. But if you did, the couples who do have that, I always feel that's a really difficult one that a relationship can totter over, because if I know there are some people who go, I'm going to bring up my child Catholic. They're going to be going to church or I'm going to bring up my child Jewish. They will be observing these holidays. They will be going to Hebrew school. They will be doing all these things. The other person doesn't feel committed, but it actually feels committed to another religion and another way of doing it, but somehow has felt compelled to go over to the other side. I mean, I think that degree of sacrifice, when it's meaningful to you,
Yeah.
can really, really can threaten the existence of a intercultural relationship. So it's
Yeah.
about a degree of adaptation that's possible.
It's the small things as well. It's like naming your child. If you're religious,
Yeah.
you might go
Yeah.
for a biblical name, for example, if you're Christian. Whereas your partner might not feel that they want to have a biblical name for their child. It's really small things sometimes, but
Those
these small
kinds of
things
things.
do build up, don't they, in
Well,
relationships?
and again, it's about how meaningful. Supposing in your culture, it's very important to name a child after a relative. But in the other culture, I mean, I can think of one where if you name somebody after a living relative, that's an insult, because you only name a child in that culture after a dead one. So it's
Oh,
like saying,
really?
"Hey, you're dead to me." So there can be kind of really, really difficult kinds of decisions
Yeah.
over what looks like something that should be a joyous thing.
Yeah, I think it takes a lot of compromise, isn't it? An intercultural relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not surprising that intercultural couples are more likely to experience conflict, tension, stress, and long term instability because of this. So they are at
Yes.
high risk of separation. And after
Yes.
reading the research that was out there on this topic, I felt there was two main challenges that could cause separation. I think there's a lot more
Okay.
than just two, but two main
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah.
And the
What are the
first
ones?
one being family influence.
Mhm.
So family influence remains quite strong among
Mhm.
recent immigrant families and those from collectivist
Mhm.
cultures. Like, I
Mhm.
know for my family, I think family influence is a big one. Um, I was I remember coming home and telling my parents that I'm dating someone from outside the culture, and I was so upset that they just didn't accept it. And I took their opinions and what they say, and I let it affect me a lot, affects my
Yeah.
relationship and my decisions really. And I don't know whether that's because I just value their opinions, but that's the way it's always been. We've always kind of been involved with each other's lives in that sense.
Mhm.
Um, or whether it's because parents are just more likely to have a say in who their child dates in our culture. I'm not too sure.
Well, you used the word just now, which I think is maybe we probably should unpack for people listening, the collectivist culture as opposed to the individualist culture.
Yeah.
And I think that's key to a lot of the point you're making here. If you come from a family and a culture where the individual um, decisions are not the primary focus of of development, but that it's really the collective, the family, one person's decision affects the family. That's the important thing. You
Yeah.
don't ever you don't take an action without prioritizing the effect that actions affect on the family. So that's the collectivist idea. What is the culture? What is the family, the community thinking? And are you cohering it by what you're doing, or are you dividing it by what you're doing? And living with that kind of consciousness as a set of values defines one way of being brought up. The other way of being brought up is you, obviously not uncaring, but that the family goes along, or the community goes along with what you think is important for you, rather than, it's their responsibility to adapt to you than yours to adapt to them.
Yeah.
It's a totally different focus. So when you put individuals from those clashing value systems together, you have a real potent problem. Because, however, you, Sereena, live in a culture that the dominant idea is the individualistic one. It's not really the collective one. And that poses more of a problem for people
Yeah.
who come to it, because you will be encouraged in your schooling and perhaps your friendship groups to be pursuing what works for you as the dominant thing. That poses a problem bringing it back in, because if what works for you is you fall in love with a guy from outside your culture, how is that going to fit?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what the main problem is when dating in different cultures, well, especially for young people like me now, is that your culture at home might be a collectivist culture. For example, our culture is collectivist, it's an Eastern culture, but you're in a Western culture that's individualistic. So you tend to see people make these decisions. Like I see my friends and they get to, do whatever they like, really, date whoever they
Yeah,
like.
yeah,
And I think that is great. That is what I want to do. So then I do it. And I come back to backlash because,
yeah.
well, that's not how we do things here. That's not how we do things in this family.
So the challenge is also for your family, because they've opted to live in a culture that doesn't fit
Yeah.
with the way they live. So, I mean, lots of subcultures have this problem. I mean, and then get prejudiced because they're seen as being different from, wanting not to be part of. Why are you not wanting to be part of us? But you're preserving your culture by
Yeah.
doing that. But it invites prejudice from others who feel you're judging them. I mean, it becomes back. It's an us versus them kind of predicament.
I know. Yeah. Um, it's interesting actually because I was looking at this study, and it was mainly sort of looking at Asian cultures and how they view intercultural relationships. And this was looking at younger adults, so 18 to 29-year-olds, sorry.
Mhm.
And 85% of them said that they would be fine if a family member was to marry someone of a different race or ethnicity.
These are the
Um,
young people saying
yeah,
that.
the young people. So it's like I'm second generation immigrants. These people are like myself.
Mhm.
Um, and they come and see a whole new culture and think this is great.
Well,
Everyone's just
yeah,
culture sharing. This is so good.
yeah.
I wouldn't mind if this happened in my family. Compared to 55% of 50 to 64-year-olds agreeing with that statement. So it does reveal an intergenerational gap, really.
It's-
Uh,
I mean, what we don't know, because it's a cohort group, whether that same group of the 55 to 60, whatever they were if they had been interviewed, and of course it's a different time, but I think they probably have moved more toward a more conservative stance. I think if you opt toward being part of what had been the culture you've been brought up in,
yeah,
you tend to then adopt that value more strongly over time. If you ask that same set of people who had been and stayed in intercultural relationships, I
Yeah.
think you'd find looking much more like the younger people.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this also having huge family influence can come as a shock to those who don't have major
Mm.
family influence in their
Yes,
relationships. So that can be
yes,
another point of conflict too. Because you think,
yes.
why are your parents getting involved in our relationship when they don't need to?
And the other way around. Why are
Yeah.
they not?
Yeah. Why do your parents
Why,
not care?
why do they not care enough? Why are they not spending more time with
Yeah.
with why are they not taking a stand
Yeah.
one way or the other? Yeah.
Yeah.
And all that brings up is the kind of knee-jerk ideas that we have about values that come into play suddenly into our consciousness when we're in an intercultural relationship. Otherwise, we don't think about it. That's just the way the parents are.
Yeah.
That's just the way families are.
It's interesting in my family because only a few people have really pushed the intercultural dating sort of thing. So when it first happened, I think one of my cousins married an Englishman, and this was before I was born. But it was quite a, oh my gosh, she's married outside of our culture. Because back then, I don't think it was even common people to marry outside of our community. So we have a community as well. So
This is here in England, not in India. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, it's bound to happen. It's
it
bound to
it's
happen.
bound to happen.
There's no
Yeah,
way.
and
And that's sorry, go on.
yeah, and I think to be honest, I think she paved the way for a lot of other people in our family to
Yeah.
sort of do the same. And
Yeah.
it has also brought a lot of richness to our life having people that aren't a part of our culture in our
Yeah.
family. I would say
Yeah.
probably a few of my favorite people in the family are not part of our culture.
Yeah.
So in that
Yeah.
way, I'm like, it can't be all bad. Um,
Yeah.
but I do see how conflict can be very distressing for people in collectivist cultures like this. So I can see why people don't push the boundaries a little bit because they can feel unsupported if they go against their parents' wishes in this way.
But that's only one of the conflicts. I mean, the thing about intercultural couples dating across cultures is, and then becoming a couple, is that no matter whether, even if you come from that's a very extreme example of the collectivist versus individual difference because it's so striking. It's so it affects so many different areas of life. But there are all sorts of other ones. So you could take, I mean, just in my experience of the American, you know, American versus British, but even thinking about Italians and or Spanish people and versus British, they're just the ways in which you express emotion or expect emotion to be expressed would be one thing, or traditions around, um, I don't know, friendships, how you conduct friendships.
Mhm.
Um, there's an awful lot more drinking among men in this culture compared to a whole lot of other ones. Going out on your own, um, or or I guess how you parent. You know, in a lot of I don't think it's true anymore, but for a long time in a lot of Latin cultures, it was very clear. There was gender divide. That's it. And you would be, it's the macho idea. You would be considered effeminate if you was caught looking after your small children. That
Yeah.
is changed. But that was not so extreme in more, in say, American or British cultures, for example. So those clashes would come out too. Um, Gender ideas would be very different in many different cultures. So I think it's those sorts of things that you come up against that you either hold very dear and don't want to change, or you come up against and you consider and go, how much can I move toward change? Or does it all me, or does that other person have to do stuff too? That's the kind of almost explicit negotiation, a lot more explicit negotiation that has to happen. It should happen, doesn't have to, it should happen in intercultural couples
Yeah.
because it's a lot more negotiation of things.
It was interesting what you said about the gender differences just then, because I always wonder, this is more so when I was younger. I think things have changed a little bit more now. It's become a lot softer with the gender divide a little bit in our family. But when I was younger, it would used to be like the women in one side, men in the other side. Men
Yeah.
would be drinking, possibly eat later, so then the women will eat first, and still have to make food for the men after. And it was always like a thing that's expected. The woman's in the kitchen. If you're a daughter, you go and help in that kitchen.
Yeah.
And I always wondered what it would feel like for someone to come into this culture, a woman to come into this culture, and then would she feel obliged to, follow the other women and just go into the kitchen?
I
How
can
would
tell you. I can tell you.
I was hoping you could.
Well, I can certainly. I think the expectation would be there, and I know it. I
Yeah.
mean, I point to particular examples of it. The expectation would be there, and it would be considered an offense if you didn't.
Yeah.
But if you're going to carry on, I mean, I know that for instance, in an Indian culture, if you lived in India, I don't know if it's still the case, you'd be expected to live in your mother-in-law's house.
Yeah.
You would give over control of family life to another generation. And there wouldn't be any way around that except to create. I mean, if you did, it would create not just resentment, but outrage, and it would be very much frowned upon. I don't know if that's still the case, but that's a huge difference for a woman from a Western culture.
Yeah, to be honest, that's the case for me at the minute, as in I live with my grandma, my dad's mum. So yeah, that is the case still. And I think that is the case
Yeah.
for a lot of people that get married in my family.
So, Sereena, I think that what for people who are younger, like your generation, who I think it becomes, as I said, almost inevitable that you're in the situation of meeting people from the dominant culture and not yours. And so, or the other way around, people who are British are now in a multicultural society.
Yeah.
So the dating group is going to be a much bigger pond. There's a bigger choice. You
Mm-hmm.
can be attracted to the differences as well as the similarities. So I think it becomes I mean, what reflections might you have on given this array of possibilities, what do you think people are, what do you think people think? Do you think they're aware of this could be difficult or and stay away more? What do you think your observations
I
are about
think
that?
I think some people. So in school, I remember hearing from a lot of people. They would like maybe an English person, but they'd be Asian, and they would keep it a secret, and they wouldn't tell their parents. And it took me about 6 months to tell my parents I was dating someone else.
Right.
Anyway, but then they wouldn't actually carry on that relationship with that person, no matter how much they liked them, and would end up with someone from their own culture. So I think it is like a bit of a fear, to be honest, bringing someone into your culture, which would be the dominant culture. Your cult, like my culture. If someone was going to come into my culture, it would be the dominant one, because I think a lot of people have opinions and a lot of people have their say. So I could see how it could be so scary coming into this culture, but at the same time, my parents, I think, have adopted the Western sort of mindset and the Western sort of way of living, because we drink a lot, we you know do everything that a normal English person would, to be honest. So when I spoke to my parents about how it's unfair that they're not giving this person a chance that I brought into my life, they actually did kind of become a bit more open-minded, which was nice.
So that's part of what I'm talking about in the negotiation, which is, here's this different thing. Can we make an adaptation? And they didn't go, no, sorry. They've opened themselves up. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know whether that's because I was a very, I think I'm a bit rebellious at times to my family. I don't think I've dated anyone that they would maybe approve of from the straight off the bat. So I'm always trying to push the boundary, but I think it's necessary to push it, because you could find someone that's so lovely and so perfect and treats you amazing and you really mesh well together, but they're just not from the same culture. And I think that's okay. So that's why I really wanted them to give this person a chance, give the person a chance, get to know them for themselves, not just because they're from this place or whatever. And they came round to it, and it was actually really positive in the end, even though our relationship didn't work out in the end. It really healed. I think it healed something between me and my parents, I have to say.
So thinking about it now, and I'm just thinking about people, when I was growing up, and I think this is still the same, in Judaism, and I think it's quite similar to what you're talking about. There's a sense of, if you marry out, it's called, you're diminishing Judaism, because there are, you don't, there are that many fewer people who are Jewish in the world. You're entering out of and diminishing the sort of supply, as it were, of Jewish people. So that's one of the reasons but it's called marrying out. And because I was never brought up in an observant tradition, that never became an issue for me. And in fact, but anyway, there was a lot of intermarriage in my family. But I remember growing up alongside people who would be astonished that I would be going out with people who were not Jewish.
I think the reason that people avoid intercultural relationships, like how you said, it was just seen as a bad thing to marry out. That was just frowned upon, wasn't it? It was, I think, my parents, when I was speaking to them the other day about just like, why is it bad to, why was it bad, actually? I should probably say past tense, because there's a lot of people with different cultures now. And they were like, well, it just brought shame onto your family, just brought shame onto us. But then I kept asking, but why? Why do they feel shame? But it was just this idea of, but our culture is not going to be the same. It's like, if you meet someone from the same culture, your kids will have the same culture. Your culture, there's no chance of it being washed down. But so I can see why people avoid dating in different cultures. And they might feel unsupported if they go against their parents as well.
They also could avoid it, because when I was 18, one of my mother's best friends, she was Jewish and she'd married somebody who wasn't. And they had even I knew it. They had a famously conflictual relationship, because they sort of conducted it in public. They were passionate people, and they stayed together till till the end. Literally, they died a long time ago, both of them. But I remember, I think I couldn't have met my husband by then, but I was probably with somebody who was not Jewish. And she pulled me aside and she goes, "Janet, you know what? There are enough differences between men and women. There are enough differences between one person and another person. Why make it more difficult to add a cultural difference in, or a religious difference in too?" And she was speaking from experience.
I mean, it does bring a lot of difference, doesn't it? It does bring a lot of strain in your relationship. I don't think I was prepared for it going into an intercultural relationship.
It rang in my ears as something that, yes, almost always I would date somebody who's not from my culture in some way, religion or upbringing or something. And I would think, that's what Beryl said. But guess what? There's a lot. I'll take that difference. I'll take that difference.
But the second, I think, challenge that could cause separation in intercultural couples is having different relationship goals. I think we touched on this a little bit. So that refers to like how a person understands love, deals with conflict, and how they express love as well. So, of course, similar relationship goals are linked to higher perceived responsiveness from their partner. So, how much a person feels understood, cared for, and validated
Yeah.
by their
Yeah.
partner.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why families and society might reject intercultural couples is because they feel their cultural differences don't gel well. So, for example, how they express emotions and handle conflict. I
Yeah.
honestly, handling conflicts in my family, this is when my culture with my English culture clashes so hard with my with my Indian culture, because
Yeah.
I would say in my culture, so it says collectivist cultures again, but in my culture specifically, they tend to communicate through sort of non-verbal cues. So more being passive aggressive, silent
Yeah.
treatment, um, and requires a lot of like reading between the lines. And that can clash so hard with individualistic cultures who value
Yeah.
directness and verbal
Yeah.
communication. Tell me what's wrong, but
Yeah.
you've never been raised in a confrontational way in that sense. So confrontation can be quite hard. And
Yeah.
I'm seen as the most confrontational in my family, surprisingly, because I don't think I am actually confrontational at all. To my friends, they would say you're not confrontational at all, but in my family, they're like, "Oh, Serena again, always got to say something, always got to air out what she thinks."
Yeah.
That's
And
one.
you've taken on something of the Western culture that does that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I think that's a big one, because
Yeah.
if you were with someone that didn't communicate the same as you in the way that they handle conflict or express emotions, that could be really difficult to overcome.
Yeah, but by the way, that's true probably, individualistically, of people's temperaments.
Yeah,
It's it's
yeah,
it's so that issue of how you both express love or express emotions, um, it's very shaped by cultural things, but it's also shaped by temperament and family. So you're gonna probably find that same issue coming up in any combination of two
yeah,
people. But you certainly can predict it better, that it's gonna be there if you have, say, a very expressive culture and a non-expressive culture. But it's what I'm saying is expect that you'll probably have to moderate. What the difference in the cultural bit is that there's a kind of value system carried behind it that's
yeah.
different in cultures. So that's unlocking it and saying when it's going to work for you and when it's not going to work for you. That's harder when you have a whole cultural system backing it up, saying it's better to be this way. No, it's better to be this way.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, isn't it? Because I think my dad always says, "Don't rise to it, and don't give anyone like ammunition." Um, but and that's always been ingrained in me. Don't rise to it. Don't be like
Mm.
confrontational.
Yeah.
Sort of let them say what they need to say and let it roll off your back, which actually goes so hand in hand with the way that Hinduism, sorry, and the way of Hinduism. Basically, it says a lot about like not internalizing other people's emotions, and
So here you go. That's an example of where there's a hugely important value system
exactly.
in behind in Hinduism that says this this is the good way.
Mm,
And then
yeah.
you have another one
Uh,
that's going, no.
yeah, then as I've grown up in England, I'm like, well, this person is saying their mind, so I should speak my mind.
Yeah.
And that's when it clashes a little bit.
So maybe there's a way in which when you do have this blending, that you kind of can see how it could be good to speak your mind as long as it um, doesn't inflame
Yeah.
or wound or,
Overtake you.
that you temper things. So
Mm,
that's the blending,
yeah,
picking the both sides.
definitely. Have we spoken about religious and spiritual differences, how that can cause discrepancies, and how a person might want to raise their children, their way of life, their thinking. That's, I think, the religious ones, for me, probably would be the biggest differences, especially if both parties are religious or one's more religious than the other.
Well, if one's more religious than the other, that's less of a problem.
What
Unless,
if one of them was atheist?
well, even that is, it's whether or not that's offensive to the
Yeah,
other. It is,
yeah,
or,
that's
people
true.
live alongside with very different ideas about God and about religion. But if one of them feels that it's integral to their whole being, that they, it's a bit like proselytizing. You have to believe this way. Then obviously that that is going to probably not work.
Yeah,
Or there's only one way to believe, and it has to be this way or that, versus that way. You can coexist otherwise with, when people say, don't talk about religion, don't bring up religion, it's about coexisting. It's
yeah,
about, I'll respect this, I'll respect that. And
yeah.
I'm not going to try to change it.
I think respect is the key word here. I think
Mhm.
in the past, in a few relationships I've had, I felt like religion has not been respected from my part. And you would never, well, personally for me, I would never disrespect someone that's religion, their beliefs. I think that's cool that you believe that and it helps you. Um, but it's not the same as mine, and that's fine. So I think it has been a shock for me when I've dealt with people that haven't respected my religion the same way.
You have to, but the thing about, I think when we drill down to what it means for intercultural dating and relating, it's about the respect comes out and there are small ways in which you you may have an impulse to impose the way you feel and feel it should be understood on someone else.
Hmm.
And the imposition feels disrespectful. So, or can feel disrespectful, or it also can be illuminating. So there's a way in which you have to manage that. I mean, thinking about things like naming a child, you know,
Yeah.
that would be, that touches onto that. Or how you bring up a child. If it's, you know, I think those become potentially touchstones. That become potentially ways in which things can just turn into conflagrations, um, or they can be, okay. Let's see how it goes. Let's see if your way works, or something like that, which is the kind of more respectful way of doing it. But it doesn't necessarily come easily.
No, it does really depend on how open a person is to trying out something new, trying out something from someone else's culture.
But also knowing when you have your red line that
Yeah.
you don't cross. And that's the other thing. That's where a lot of relationships do break down, because you wouldn't know it, but this is a red line that he crossed or I crossed for him, and
Hmm.
it's not going to happen.
No. Another part of different cultures and how they differ is how they express love. I mean, this is quite a funny one when I was reading the research around this, because I was thinking, oh yeah, I never thought about this. I don't know, just never thought that people express love differently in different cultures. And I think to like my family, we don't really say love you to each other. I think I remember my dad saying it once to me and I didn't know what to reply. It was just so odd. It was like, we don't say that. How we show our love is through like doing stuff for people, you make me nice food or you take me to
Right.
here.
There've been quite a bit of studies on how the expressiveness and words of love come through women more, and acts of love are things like I paint the walls for you. That, or I fix the car. Um, or if you don't make my dinner, then you don't love me. That there's a different that are very gendered.
But I think we can both agree that staying open to different cultures can bring a rich variety of conflict tactics, communication styles, and ways of life that a person has not had before. I think it can bring fresh perspectives to a lot of situations coming from a different culture.
Absolutely. And can bring a level of difficulty that doesn't exist in
Yeah.
non-intercultural relationships.
Yeah. Oh, there's always good and bad to everything, isn't there? Follow Relationships Unplugged on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. If you'd like to learn more about what 1+1 do, visit www.1plus1.org.uk or get involved in the conversation on 1plus1.circle.so. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, so we'll see you there.